this proposal essentially would take the three PSS positions that are currently assigned to patrol divisions and reassign those positions under a different classification in the Development Services Department. Development Services would assign the people that are assigned to these three classifications back to the police department to work in the patrol divisions. So basically, the change would be that they would be working for Development Services and in the Development Services budget, but be working with and out of the patrol divisions.
And I mean, listen, if that's something the department feels is feasible and are comfortable with, I'm okay with it. I just personally have a little bit of, to me, it makes more sense that they would manage for the police department if they're doing police work.
Council member, if I may, we have a similar situation that has been working quite well with the Technology Services Department. We had a number of technology classifications that were working in the police department, were in the police department budget and working for the police department. We have transferred those positions to the Technology Services Department. The personnel are still assigned to the police department, work out of our headquarters activity, but are working essentially for the police department under the leadership of the Technology Services Department. It's actually resulted in a lot better collaboration on a number of technology-related issues, and we expect that we could probably get the same sort of benefit from the reassignment of the PSSs.
Thank you. In addition, I know here there's some money listed, for either overtime and or the restoration of some gang unit officers. And I again go back to my statement from before. I think that we need to at least include $2 million of overtime in this budget. We're going to spend that amount of money, and to not list it accurately, I just don't think it makes sense. So I'm going to be advocating for that, for us to at least find some type of solution on that number. I know it's at 1.3 now, but that includes two items of interest. I know there's some members here, so that's another area I'd like to discuss. And then just generally, I'm hopeful that we can have a discussion about, I do see 4 items. I think it's the gang unit officers, the PDPSS positions, and certainly the after-school programs. I think those are certainly general fund items. It should be in the general fund portion of the budget and not in the one-time portion. So if that's possible, I'd like to see those changes. It may not be, but I do want to have that discussion. And I'll pass for now, and I'm curious to see what everybody else says. Thank you.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I too would like to start out by thanking the Budget Oversight Committee for all of their hard work. I think they've done a great job at addressing the concerns that was brought forth by all the council officers during their budget hearings and actually taking the advice of our citizens. I had the opportunity to sit in on the Budget Oversight meeting this afternoon, and I agree with Councilmember O'Donnell's recommendation, which we need to find a way to, if at all possible, along with what Vice Mayor Garcia just stated, to restore the gang unit to address the PSS positions. We haven't had any conversations in regard to the proposed loss of the fire engine, and any recurring revenue, I think, should be used to restore those things. The fire engine, looking at how we can fully staff the gang unit and addressing the PSS, as well as the park ranger program. So I would like to have some discussion around that.
Okay, Mr. O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Again, we talk about the BOC doing a lot of work, and it's truly did a good amount of work, but I have to point out the staff job on this. We got to show up for an hour or so and kind of tell you what to do, and you got to go do it. And I'm sure it's a lot of work to climb into a computer and figure out all these numbers and adjust them and figure out what we meant. And Mr. Gross, you and your team have done a great job, so my compliments to you. Is it appropriate to make a motion right now, Mr. Mayor? What I'd like to do is move the budget as proposed, but I would like to make an alteration.
Mr. Mayor, we have a motion on the floor.
We do? Oh, we do. Okay, so this would be a substitute motion. I'm sorry, I did not realize there was a motion. So, again, I would like to make a motion, a substitute motion, and I'll speak to it momentarily. But again, I'm not going to address it right now, but I'd like to have further study on how we can address the park rangers. And I don't know how many of you have been around Long Beach that long, but there were, not too long ago, a number of years ago, there were significant problems in our parks, especially Eldorado Park, gang problems, etc. So you need to make sure that we have people that are prepared and appropriately trained to address those issues. So again, I'm not going to address that tonight, but I'm willing to study that program more to find out where we can save money, where we can maybe add money, but again, I don't know how tonight. The Parks and Recs programs, I'm glad to see a restoration there. Very important to me. If I just drop down, the one thing I would like to take a look at and alter actually is the citywide slurry seal program. We've got $2 million in that, and I just think that's a pretty big jump. We don't have a regular slurry seal program, as I recall, and I think throwing $2 million at it in 1 year is a pretty big ramp up. And I know the slurry seal actually doesn't even always work. So what I'd like to do is remove the $1 million from the slurry seal and apply it to the, and I'm looking for the restoration of gang unit officers and the PSS positions. And again, I'd like to give the chief some leeway in how he addresses that, but that is my intent. So again, remove $1 million from the slurry seal program. Streets are important. I love to repair them. There's nothing more beautiful than a newly paved street to a council member. So some people love the Super Bowl, love to watch the Super Bowl. I know Gary and I love to go down a newly paved street. That's pretty neat to us. But yes, you can. Just let me clarify that again. $1 million from the slurry seal to the restoration of the PSS and gang unit officers.
The clarification is those separate items. There's a police overtime and/or restoration of gang unit officers, where I think you'd like it to go to, because the PSS item below is fully funded.
Yeah, but you're laying off 16 of them in this budget.
Oh, excuse me. Okay, so you want to
Right.
Got it. So,
And I want to give the chief some leeway
so you'd like
in
to
how he approaches this problem, because he knows his department better than I do.
So you'd like it modified to the police overtime and/or restoration of gang unit officers and/or restoration of additional PSSs.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Correct. So with that, that is my motion. That is the substitute.
Second. Mr. Rawson seconds. Okay. Mr. Ross.
Thank you. And I want to thank city staff and my colleagues here for making my first budget experience a very interesting one, to say the least. I agree with most of the comments thus far. I do think, and I think the substitute motion was well received. I seconded it because I think, although we have, I think, listened to many of the public comments and addressed the needs of our community as raised by at our many budget community budget meetings, I think it misses the mark in terms of public safety, and I'd like to see more for gang enforcement. I just don't think that this as proposed does enough to meet our needs in our districts throughout the city. We do have a significant gang problem, and I would challenge our police officers to tell me anything differently. So Mr. O'Donnell's substitute motion is well received, but I still don't think it fully meets the mark. I'm also concerned about our fire services. Not enough has been said about that. We are cutting an engine company from our service. We don't know where that's coming from and what effect that's going to have on the city overall. So I'm still very concerned that we haven't really done anything to address that. The Rancho Los Alamitos item is new, and I do sympathize, but I don't think that this necessarily meets parity, because as you can see, $500,000 versus $374,000 and plus 180. That's not equal. But I'm not saying that everything has to be equal. It's just this is a new issue that has come up before us, and I've had an opportunity to meet with the board members from Rancho Los Cerritos, and this is new to me. I'm sorry I haven't had an opportunity to meet with the folks from Los Alamitos. So, but not that I'm opposed to doing this. I just concerned that this was kind of last minute. One of the big issues that I have here is that the use of one-time funds. The mayor has lectured us ad nauseum about the use of one-time funds and the policy set forth. I see that Parks and Recreation, youth services are now budgeted as one-time funds, yet we're restoring $1 million and $300,000 for sidewalk repairs and tree trimming, which are capital projects, in my opinion, in nature. And I think that we should probably look at switching those out in terms of how we move forward on this. And so I would just acknowledge that, or I ask that my fellow council colleagues acknowledge that as well. And beyond that, I think there's still some conversation that needs to be had, but I think we've moved a long way toward getting there. Like I said, I just think it misses the mark in terms of our needs to address public safety.
Does Mr. O'Donnell's substitute get you where you need to go on the public safety?
It moves us in a better direction. I think we need to do more.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Well, first, I just want to discuss the slurry program. This city it used to have a slurry program. At one time, it was $2 million a year, and that was many years ago. And so now, because of the higher price of oil, the $2 million will get us much less than it used to, but it's still very important. The city auditor has told us something that we all know, which is the same thing the Public Works Director has told us. We spend $2 million, we're going to save millions down the road and much more expensive repairs. $2 million will save us $12 million in the coming years. And I think we have a moral duty to leave the city in at least as good a shape that we receive this. I think that is very important, and that's thinking smart as well as doing the right thing. Also, I want to talk about these one-times. There's been some good discussion on that. I think what we need to do is we need to achieve pension reform to stop the reductions, the structural reductions. I'm confident that in the next budget year, because we'll have an open contract, I think this city can come together and achieve pension reform, which will lower our costs. So because of that, I think it is appropriate to spend the money for the Parks and Rec after-school program on a one-time basis. That's to get us a one-time bridge to those lower long-term costs. So I think it's appropriate to use the money to preserve the services this year and make sure we preserve them on a structural basis with pension reform that we need to start working on very soon. But I'm confident this council will achieve that for the next fiscal year. With that, I would like to make a substitute motion. And that substitute, I would like to take Councilor DeLong's original motion and move the $225,000 on the Mayor's Economic Development Fund to police overtime. And I would also like to move $25,000 from the Rancho Los Alamitos capital improvement to overtime as well. So staying with most of that money that Councilor DeLong's asked for, but putting just a small amount back in overtime. And I'd love to have a second.
Is there a second?
I'll certainly second it for discussion.
All right, we have it second. We have 3 motions. That's as much as we can. Have you concluded, Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Thank you. Councilmember Shipsky.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I, too, would like to thank staff for their hard work. And Mr. DeLong, my phone number is 570-6932 because, unlike Mr. Garcia, I didn't get any phone calls about the budget.
He tweets.
Right. A couple of things. I am concerned we have not been given any details about park rangers We didn't have a public discussion about how many calls for services they had last year, what kind of services do they respond to. We just had a summary, they're gone. And it particularly impacts, as Mr. O'Donnell indicated, all the parks, but particularly since they were relegated only to El Dorado Park. I have to tell you, the police are going to have their hands full because after dark, that park, the nature center, and the regional park become a great haven for a lot of people who can't commit crime out in public. If that's what we want in this city, that's what we're going to get. I am concerned also that we really didn't have a thorough discussion about the impact of the ongoing cuts in fire service. I asked Mr. West if we could have that. The report was sent to council, but we've never had a public discussion indicating about that the response times for EMS have gone up with the budget cuts. Also, we really don't know the details of what engine is being taken out of service. That's kind of an interesting way to budget. We'll get the details after we pass the budget. The other thing I'm very concerned about is that this council has not reviewed nor approved this new paramedic service model, and I certainly will not vote for this if there's the inference that we're doing so tonight. We haven't seen it. The County of LA, EMS hasn't approved it, and it may not. So I would hope that before we go down that road, that I was hoping we could take that $400,000, Mr. DeLong, that you put in here from the BOC. I believe where's the $400,000 for the so-called new paramedic service model, and take that and put it into a split light force, because in essence we are going to see some reduction in services. And since we don't know what this program is, we haven't seen it, we don't know what the cost is going to be, and in my discussions with the county, and it was confirmed by the press, it looks like this isn't going to happen for near a year. I would hope that we could take this money and get it into the split light force, and that would help, I think, on that. So I would ask that, since there's no more, we're motion sickness here, we have too many motions, so if there's a way that we could get that into we'll call it even then for a phone call, if we could do that. And I agree with my colleagues, the overtime for PD, opposing that next to the gang detail, also SART team, domestic violence response team, not a way to run for public safety in a town that really is seeing an uptick in crime, whether or not we'd like to admit it. Any of us who get the WCLs can see that we are having an increase of crime. And so I would hope that if it isn't, I understand Mr. Johnson's passion for slurry seal, then I will tell you, if I have a crime in my district, I'm going to call a police officer and not a slurry truck. And so I would hope if we can make and James, I agree with him about slurry, but in this case, I think we've got to be very careful. And last but not least, I'm disappointed once again, this is 6th year, and I can't imagine any private business running an operation with 4,000 to 5,000 employees and not having an automated timekeeping system, so that we in fact know who's at work, when they're at work, and that we can do HR management much more efficiently. So I would ask Mr. DeLong if we could do something about the $400,000 on the paramedic program, and see if we can't get that into the life force, and maybe somebody could explain how that would impact. And then also, I'm sure it won't go anyplace, but I'd like to, if we're concerned about kids programs, and I appreciate the mayor offering up the economic development fund, and I agree. I think it's been outstanding what's been happening in the city with economic development. I would ask we take the $225,000, put it in the libraries. The libraries have been servicing kids after school, reading programs, a variety of things that, by us taking action that we've had in the past, we've taken those programs away. So for those of you who have any room in your motions, if you could add those things, I would be most appreciative. Thank you.
Mr. DeLong.
I'll pass. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I think this is a very healthy discussion, and I think what you see behind the dais is that there is a huge concern for several of these items. for a process question, we can't have more than 3 motions, correct? So we're all motioned out. You know, I think they could all die. That's probably a good idea. I lost my train of thought. What I'd like to see is really some more emphasis on the public safety part. I think the BOC and city staff has done a great job at addressing all the issues that have been placed before us, knowing that everybody's not going to get everything that they want, but there's definitely a need to look a little more seriously at the public safety, particularly the gang unit, police overtime. As Councilmember Shipsky just mentioned, there's been no mention whatsoever which fire unit is going to be out of service, and I think those are all some serious challenges that we have, as well as looking at the park rangers. I don't see any reason that we have to push this through this evening. We've got one more week to try to get this done. I think it would behoove all of us if we were to put another week's effort into this and maybe come up with something that's a little bit more amenable to all parties.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Mr. Mayor, I just want to clarify my motion. I had a discussion and there was another suggestion about not the substance of the motion, but where we take the money from. So let me kind of explain to you where I see we take the money. And again, we put it in the same place. We put it in the gang unit overtime PSS fund, more funds. We have if you look at the bottom of the sheet that we have in front of us.
Just for process, do we want to deal with the motion that's on the table? And then
Let me just clarify the motion so they'll know that they want to vote on mine.
Got it, okay.
But what I seek to do is to collapse the 2 bottom funds into one fund. So the citywide street slurry program would be combined with the residential street repaving fund. Those would become one fund, and then take $775,000 out of that fund to be applied to the aforementioned programs, and $225,000 from the mayor's economic development fund, and apply it to the same place.
Does the second accept that change? Well, the way I understood the motion to be was that you would actually be taking $1 million out and applying it to
It equals $1 million.
It equals $1 million.
775 plus 225,000.
Well, no, you didn't mention the mayor's fund,
Right.
economic development fund.
Correct. Right. That's why I'm re-clarifying where the money would come from.
Well,
Earlier I stated that it would all come from the slurry seal program. So what I'm doing is I'm changing my motion so that the slurry seal program fund and the residential street repaving fund would become one bucket of money. I'm taking $775,000 out of that.
Well, my second would hold if you were to consider doing $1 million from that single fund and $225,000 from the mayor's economic development fund.
No, I'm going to stick with the original number. And that would be a whole new motion in my mind, quite frankly. What I'm doing is changing the funding sources, coming out of the same giant bucket of money, which is places in the bucket.
Well, if you change your motion, the second has a right to withdraw a second, in which case the motion fails.
Can I seek another
Would you
second?
ask for another second?
Certainly.
Okay, so, Mr. Ross, you want to withdraw your second?
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a process question?
Go ahead.
If the seconder withdraws, does that allow Mr. Councilmember O'Donnell to become the substitute motion, or does he stay in queue? I know it's a nuance.
It is a nuance, and I'll make an educated guess that he probably has to go to the end of the queue.
Well, he becomes the last one.
Then he becomes the last
If I
motion.
may, I would say if we go back to the process, which is we deal with Councilmember Johnson's motion now, and we'll revert back to the substitute, then if Mr. O'Donnell would like to clarify it, and then if Mr. Austin wants to withdraw, then he can get a second at that point in time. I think that would be the appropriate process.
Mr. Shannon, any objections?
That's fine.
All right, thanks. Okay, Mr. Garcia.
No, I'll pass for now.
Okay.
Public comment?
Councilmember Lowell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I wanted to thank everyone for their efforts throughout this budget process. I know each of us had community meetings in our districts. I had 2 in the 2nd district, and I think there's a overwhelming theme that we saw in most of our community meetings, which is individuals who are impacted the most. That was a kick from Mr. Councilmember. Yeah. Those of us that are impacted the most, what we heard was a lot from children for the programs that they count on at the parks, and a lot from seniors. And I think that was a resounding theme from between districts, amongst districts, and all throughout the city. And what I think this proposal does, a great majority of what's been outlined by the Budget Oversight Committee, is restoration of programs that really in these very, very tough years have helped our residents not feel as though their quality of life has eroded in ways that perhaps in other cities they have. We are very fortunate here. We have access to one-time resources that other cities do not. And for many years, over 5 at least, our residents have been able to feel that their quality of life has been preserved to some degree. And I think the restorations that the Budget Oversight Committee has proposed allows us to continue to do that. And one of the things that we heard in our Budget Committee meetings is, not the committee meetings, the Budget Community meetings, is that we shouldn't forget those who built this city, which is our seniors truly, which are our seniors, and we shouldn't forget those who will be the future of our city, and those are the young children that depend on the programs that they can have access to. And family structures have changed, not only in our city, but really throughout, and they've changed such that our children now depend on parks for this new definition of family. And so I'm very pleased with the ability that this proposal from the Budget Oversight Committee makes, the ability that it provides to restore those programs as well as to restore the senior programs. And so that is why I'm fully in support of that. I do value the need for police overtime as well as other public safety features that I know have been cut. At the same time, we have to ask ourselves, where would that come from? There isn't an endless source of funds, and so when we try to make those adjustments, we have to realize that they are coming from someplace, and all places are essential to this budget. The other point I wanted to make, which I made at the Budget Oversight Committee, is really the importance of infrastructure. When Lieutenant Governor Cruz Bustamante was in office, there was a state infrastructure report. I think it was called Infrastructure for the 21st Century. I think Mr. Mayor remembers it. And it amounted to this unbearable amount of money that California infrastructure was in desperate need of. Our city is not unique. If we take the size of our city, that's the infrastructure need that we have. And truly to be able to just maintain and restore, not even to rebuild, but to maintain and restore, I have to agree with Councilmember Johnson that it will avoid having to make that investment into a greater investment into the future, especially if things become or get to a point of disrepair. And on the fire chief's proposal, I do want to thank Fire Chief DeRee for being solid on his paramedic model proposal, as well as being able to defend the budget that he proposed. I want to be sure that we offer our new fire chief the same parity that we talk about. We give Chief McDonald quite a bit of respect for his recommendations and for knowing his business. And I'd like to be sure that we do the same for Chief DeRee. I don't know that I'd be qualified necessarily to review a paramedic model. That's why we have a chief in place. And I'm confident that the research he has done and the evidence he has shown with regard to the expectation of the response times and certainly the response times benefiting patients, I trust that. So I want us to be very careful in how we offer deference and respect in terms of which of our directors know their line of business. And with that, I am in full support of the Budget Oversight Committee's recommendations. I could live with some of the amendments that have been made and would like to hear discussion from the rest of us.
Okay, we're going to go to public discussion now. Will any member of the public who wishes to address the council on these issues please come forward, identify yourself, be mindful of the time. Sorry, but Mr. Johnson, before we have public comment, Mr. Johnson, for one final comment before we go to public comment.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for Mr. Conway, our Public Works Director. Mr. Conway, my understanding is you're aware of a long list of streets that if we don't slurry seal soon, will basically degrade to the point we'll have to repay at a much higher cost, hitting the general fund. Could you detail, is that correct? And about how much slurry seal need citywide would you say there is?
Councilmember Johnson, members of the City Council, currently under our pavement management system, we've identified about 32 million square feet of streets that have a pavement condition index between 70 and 80, which we identify as eligible slurry seal candidates. If you divide that equally in half, there's probably 16 million square feet with a pavement condition index between 70 and 75, which in my opinion is on the cusp of going from slurry seal to a potential repave. A slurry seal cost is going to be, along with asphalt patching, is going to be about 60 cents a square foot. A repavement is going to be about $6 a square foot. So as the mayor had earlier indicated, Councilmember DeLong has earlier indicated, there's about a tenfold increase in price if we move over the cusp of slurry seal into a repavement.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Conway. Well, I guess I have a question for Councilor O'Donnell. Councilor O'Donnell, I understand that you and some of your colleagues really want to fund more police overtime, which I think is important. I guess my question for you is, would you be open to a friendly amendment? And I'm not sure if my motion or your motion is on the floor, but would you be open to reducing, having a slurry program as a separate program, but reducing that by $500,000 to $1.5 million, and then reducing residential street repaving by a lesser amount by $275,000, freeing up $775,000 going to police overtime. So it's very similar to your motion. All it would do is make us have a citywide slurry program like virtually all cities in our region do. So would be amenable to that compromise?
Not at this time. Actually, I thought we were going to work through this so that we go through your motion, then we'd get to mine. There could be further discussion at that time, I assume. But again, I'd like to get to my motion first. So at this point, no.
Well, actually, we have his motion.
But I know, I'm sorry, did I not say that? His goes first. So. And then we would get to my motion.
Well, I would argue, Mr. Johnson, save that for if and when we get to Mr. O'Donnell's motion.
Okay, well, I would be happy to take that as an amendment if Mr. O'Donnell wanted, but since he apparently doesn't, I'll leave my motion as is.
Okay. All right, we'll take public comment now. Please identify yourself and be mindful of the 3 minutes. You see the yellow light, that means you have 30 seconds. Thank you.
My name is Barbara Sinclair. My address is on file. 16 years ago, my partner and I bought a house in the little 2-block Wrigley Historical District. And we did that because we wanted a place where we felt the neighbors would have pride of place, where it was going to be well kept, where the trees would be trimmed and the streets would be maintained, and that it was a beautiful area where our property would increase in value the longer we were there. And I say that because all of those things really no longer would matter to me if we lost our gang unit. I think that with all the improvements we need to make in the city and the limited amount of money, for me at least, and a lot of people I know, people need to come first. Children need to come first. And I'm gratified that the funds are going to be restored for after-school programs, because if children have a place to go, if they have a nature center to teach them something other than inner-city streets, if we have a gang unit to crack down on people being recruited into gangs, all of these things are going to impact the city positively, and we have to find a way to do those things. I have a small issue, I suppose, with the wording of the money being restored to overtime and or the gang units, because I think we know that what that really means is overtime, because that money is going to be spent. It has to be spent. If I were up there and able to create some kind of an amendment, I would ask for the word "or" to be deleted and for money to be guaranteed to be going to the gang units. Also in the area that I live, we are a couple of blocks away from two of the most notorious gangs probably in the country, the Baby Insane Crips, and I can't remember the name of the other one. And the gang unit in the last couple of years has made incredible strides in keeping those gangs under control, in keeping recruitment under control. And I don't know what I would do if that went away. I think we would be going down a slippery slope into a dark hole that we don't want to go back into. I do, of course, support infrastructure improvements, but I really do feel that people and programs for people need to come first, and I hope you'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Sinclair. Next, please.
And park rangers.
Good evening, Mayor Foster, council members, and city staff. My name is Natalie Peterson. I'm a resident of the 7th District, and I'm here to speak on the budget proposal to cut library costs by converting 6 branches into reading rooms. I'm not sure if this proposal is still on the table. I sincerely hope it is not, but if it is, I urge you to reconsider. When I mentioned this to a friend of mine who's also a very active library patron, her reaction was, if I wanted a room to read in, I would stay at home. I'm sure you're familiar with the numbers. Nearly 1.4 million items checked out from the library just over the course of 2011. My local branch alone, Dana Branch, 110,000 visitors in that same year, 600 children using the library for children's programs. From a personal standpoint, I cannot imagine raising my children in Long Beach without the library system here. They've benefited from children's programs as they've gotten older. They've used the library all the time for school projects, and I'm also active in my book club at the library. My children would have come with me tonight if tomorrow weren't the first day of school, but I can tell you that they actively encouraged me to leave the dinner table and come down here and speak to you tonight about this. I appreciate how difficult it is to balance the city budget, especially in these challenging times, and I don't imagine that any of you would have considered this lightly. However, I consider the library a health and safety issue, just like police and fire, and also important like infrastructure. The health and safety of our community is what's at stake when we start cutting library hours more than they've already been cut. If this proposal is off the table, please accept my profound gratitude for this, that of my family, and that of the many patrons that I know who use the library all the time. If it is still on the table, I urge you to reconsider and find a better way. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your hard work.
Mr. Mayor, can I respond?
You sure, man?
Yes, ma'am. That proposal is off the table. The proposal in front of the council is to restore funding, which restores the programs.
Thank you.
Next, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Council. My name is Linda Ivers. The clerk has my address on file. I want to compliment the creativity of the Budget Oversight Committee and the council members on the suggestions that they've come up with for finding funds for the gang units, the PSSs, and police overtime. I would make one suggestion after having worked with the PSSs for the last 20 years as a member of the community and very actively with several of them in the last 8 years when I worked for the city. The PSS positions that are located within the police division stations